This is the Archangel 2210 here to give you a Smallville Season 10 discussion. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do a review of any of the episodes till after all of them are on DVD, but I felt like I gotta talk about this now, or else I'm going to burst. Um, there was a lot of exposition they had to go through in the Season 10 finale. A lot. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions. You know, does anyone else feel that way? I feel like there was still a lot of unanswered questions. First of all, in the very beginning, we see Chloe reading a comic book of Smallville to a little boy who looks about 5 or 7 years old. And I was thinking, okay, at first I'm like, okay, maybe that's her kid, that's her son, and she's reading, and she knows about Clark and everything. She's telling the story to him. And then we rewind to 7 years in the past, which is the present right now, and it's Clark and Lois getting married. And basically, that's all of part one. All of part one is Clark and Lois trying to get married and basically trying to convince each other to get married or not, to not get married. Lois was against it, Clark was for it. And basically, he was trying to convince her to get married in the first half of that episode. And then she kind of convinced him, I don't want to get married. And then Chloe gave Lois Clark's vows, and that convinced her, okay, what was I thinking? I gotta marry him. Which I was like, yeah, Lois, what are you thinking? Come on. It's like, I know she's got a big heart and she's so selfless, but, you know, come on. It's like, why are you gonna just, like, sit back and say, oh, I can't marry you? It's like, no, just marry him. Come on. So, then she goes to the apartment and she's getting ready for the wedding, and then he's gonna go there and convince her, maybe you're right. And then she basically had to convince him to get married again, but she didn't know that's what he was thinking. So then she pushed him her vows. So basically, we hear both of their vows twice in this episode. Um, when they were reading it separately, and then when they said it to each other at the end of the ceremony. But then remember, Oliver Queen is still possessed by the Omega Beams. He's still been imprinted by it. And, you know, I still don't understand why Clark didn't X-ray him and find out if he had the Omega Beam on him. But all right, let's just roll with it. And then the gold kryptonite that was in previous episode before, and we all thought, how's it gonna get into the finale? I was thinking, how are they gonna work this into the finale? Because if we can't have it where he actually uses it and he takes away Clark's powers, because supposedly it's permanent. Unlike blue kryptonite or any other kryptonite, it's permanent. Where other kryptonites are temporary, this one's permanent. So he fashions the gold kryptonite into a ring, and Lois was about to put it on him. And then good thing Oliver showed both the rings to Chloe before, because she was able to recognize that it didn't look the same, and she went, no! She knocked it out of his hand. And then I was thinking, oh great, Lois is probably going to think that Chloe's trying to ruin the wedding and that she doesn't want them to get married, because that's what it kind of looked like from like the other people's perspective. It looked like she still had attachments to Clark. But then, and they very quickly realized that Oliver's possessed, he's not himself, and then he basically they don't get married. They said their vows and everything, but that was the last part, so they never got married at that part. And they don't get married till 7 years later. So all that wedding and everything was basically a waste. We saw a wedding, but they didn't actually get married at that point. So I felt like all that was kind of a waste of time. It was nice as it was to see Lois in a dress, and nice it was to see them actually in a church getting married and walking down the aisle. If they weren't actually going to get married at that point, I felt like it was kind of a waste of time. I hate to say it, but I felt like that part was kind of a waste of time. Like they were just eating up time and eating up an episode. Because that whole episode was just them two convincing each other to get married or not get married. That was basically all of part one. And then I was like, okay, all part one was talking. Now that we're going to get to the action of part two. When I went to part two, and that's what I really thought. Oh, kind of. Now, with Lex. Lex came back. It was fantastic. Now with Lex's comeback, they did half of what I thought and half of what I knew they were going to do. They used the clone. Well, not a complete clone. What Lionel did is that he took all the parts of, like, all the perfect parts from different clones, and he made basically a Lex Frankenstein. Well, it's not like he had, like, separate arms and legs, but just the inner organs were all different. So he had all these scars on his body. And then the last part he needed was a heart. So he was actually going to just take the heart from Tess. So that's what all the ambush was in part 1 when they were trying to get her. That was Lionel trying to get Tess and trying to basically dissect her for her heart, and he basically had strapped to a table like, oh, you should do this for your brother, for love and everything. And I was thinking, oh crap, she's gonna die. I was thinking, oh, she's gonna die, even though she's Tess Mercer. I'm not sure, but I think she was a character that was created in the Superman cartoon. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not entirely sure on that. I'm not 100%. If you know the origin of that character completely, whether if it was in the Superman cartoon or in the comics, write a comment below, because I don't know exactly. I think so. I think she was in the cartoon. So I think that was their excuse for killing her. Now, she didn't get dissected. She fought her way out of that, so I was thinking, oh good, she got her way out of there. But so then, okay, Lex still needs a heart. So what happens? Darkseid comes in as the smoke fog that he is, and he basically, because I knew that he struck a deal with him, because in the previous episodes, well, way back, when Lex got his basically all of LuthorCorp taken away from him, and he was nothing again, and he went to Lex's grave and he said, I'll do anything to get you back. Those are very careful words when Darkseid is around. So basically, Darkseid comes up to him, and that was the end of the episode. And I was like, he must have struck a deal with him. And the deal was, what I thought, when they revealed it here, was that Darkseid offered, I'll bring him back in exchange for your life. And that's basically what he did. And at this point, Lionel had no other choice. So he was like, alright, fine. Do it. So basically, Darkseid ripped out his heart, changed it where it would work, because if you remember, Lionel's from the reversed world, so if his fingerprints were reversed, so would all his internal organs. So I'm sure Darkseid had to reverse it and put it in Lex and bring him back. And then Darkseid went inside Lionel's body. Now Lex clone has all of Lex's memories, everything all the way back to his childhood and all the times he had on Smallville, everything, even though he's a clone. Now he has this conversation with Clark. Basically, Clark goes to the mansion. He's like, oh, I forgot why. He had some sort of device, and he was able to, because he was able to figure out where Tess was, not with his Clark powers, not with his supervision and all his hearing and everything. They actually had it where he figured it out with his Clark Kent and intrepid reporter abilities. I was like, you know what? I'm glad that they did that. They finally had Clark Kent being the intrepid reporter, because we got trickles of it before in the season, but who was doing the reporting previous in the show, like figuring who is where and like what to do what? It was always either Chloe or Lois, or even Tess. They were always doing it for him. But since he couldn't do this part with his abilities, he's like, I did it all, and he was like a fish in water. He knew exactly how to do it. I was like, oh, go Clark. He's doing it. He's being the reporter now. And I can't remember all the stuff that he said, but Clark and Lois, they would like practically finish each other's sentences as the two reporters. I was thinking, like, man, it's too bad it's ending at this point, because this would be such a great point where, not to get a full season, but at least get like half a season or a few more episodes where we could like get a few more answers, a few more questions answered. Well, anyway, basically, Clark goes to the mansion, the demolished mansion, and sees Lex. They basically have a conversation where Lex is like, they talk about the history and this, that, whatever. But to basically give the long story short, Lex basically says we both have a great destiny. We're just on either sides of it, and he basically said, "Let the battle begin." That's what Lex basically said. He said, "I'm not gonna fight you now, but you are my enemy, and I'm gonna fight you in the future." And I was like, "Ooh, that is good. That was good." I was thinking because basically Clark was like, "Oh, my destiny was not for you to take," and that's what it really came down to. That's what the animosity was. That Lex saw that Clark had all this power and all this greatness and light inside of him, and that Clark was fighting this destiny at the time when he knew him, and he didn't want this great destiny, and Lex wanted it for himself. So and he's like, now I forged my own destiny to be his enemy, his adversary, his great, you know. So now Lex finally understood that. Now, so basically, Tess goes to Lex's thing, and you know, basically he kills Les. He kills Lex. Excuse me. Lex kills Tess, and I was thinking I was not expecting that. I part of me felt like she was gonna die, but I was not expecting her to die at the hands of Lex. And then, of course, he fell apart. Like he didn't die, Lex didn't die, but um, basically all the memories he had in Smallville were erased. Everything. And that was because of the clone something or other, like the serum or whatever that kept him alive. And he said, how long? And 30 seconds. And then all the memories he had from like the meteor shower in Smallville, um, him meeting Clark in Smallville, all the stuff he saw in Smallville, everything, and the fortress falling down, and him seeing the fortress, all those memories got burned out of his head, and you know, and then the Luthor part of Luthor Corp, the like I guess you could say Uther, that smashed off the debris, and then the big huge electrical X went there, and I was thinking, oh, now it's gonna be LexCorp. I was thinking, oh shoot, like because that was another little thing that they had to tie, because it's not called Luthor Corp in the comics, it's called LexCorp, so they had to do that little thing in there. Now, the battle between Clark and Darkseid. Now this is what I kind of have to say. Now part one was all about remembering his past and not to forget it and not put it behind him. That was a good part. That was a good episode to put the montage of him remembering all his past adventures and all his past saves in part one. Where instead of having the wedding and everything, because since they didn't get married anyway, I wouldn't have had the wedding because I felt like that was partially a waste of time. It should have just been him remembering his past. That's what part one should have been, and part two should have been looking to the future. So part two, what I would have done, I would have had it where a good chunk of it took place 7 years in the future, and then we go to a scrapbook, that Chloe has, because Chloe would probably be the one to have a scrapbook of all the adventures, and she'll look through the scrapbook, and it'll be all the headlines from like the very first headline to the most recent of every headline that has the Superman on it, and she'll just go into the scrapbook, and it has all of these Superman headlines, and that's basically how you'll see what happens in that 7 year block, because there's a whole 7 year block of time that we don't see, and we don't know what happens from the time that he defeats Darkseid, I guess you could say, but even though that didn't really happen, to the moment of time that the very last frame of the show is. That's a 7 year block of time. We don't know what happened, you know. So I would have liked a montage of like newspaper headlines that shows Superman saves the day, Superman saves Metropolis, Superman saves the city from Lex, Superman saves the city from the Toyman again, you know. The Man of Steel thwarts Lex's plan. Certain just like random things, or even making references to previous movies and comic book storylines. You know, Lex saves the city from Brainiac. You know, like certain storylines. You know, just bring up headlines that were certain storylines in the comics or something, and that would have been great for them. But they didn't do that. So instead, they had Chloe reading a comic book to a little boy. Now, the little boy is still in question. Now, who you may think, who you. Now, at first, I thought, okay, that's her son. But when I saw at the second part, I'm thinking, because I saw her leaving the room. Oh, sorry about that. Hit the microphone. I saw her leaving the room, and I saw a bow and arrow. Now, her and Oliver are still married, and they dabbled on that in the first part, where, oh, blah, 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 would you have still done it if you weren't on his hand a spell? And they both said yes, and I don't think so. Now, if they're going to have it where that is Chloe and Oliver's son, I'll be very disappointed. Because Chloe's a made-up character in DC Comics. She just recently got inducted into the DC Comics universe. So to have her have a kid with Oliver Queen is I would not have done. I would have either had her, if you want her to have a kid, I would have had her had a kid with a random character, or Dr. Hamilton, or, you know, another made-up character, you know, that was also there, or Peter, somebody, I don't know, you know, but having her have a kid with Oliver, I no. But here's my theory. Maybe that's not her kid, because the kid didn't say mom. I was thinking, okay, maybe that's Oliver's kid, but maybe she's just babysitting. Maybe that's really Oliver and Dinah's kid, and maybe she's just babysitting. Just a thought. That's what I'm having in my head instead. Because I don't want to accept that, even though they were still married in that finale two-parter, I don't want to accept that in 7 years in the future, they're still married and they have a kid together. Because that does not go with the comics at all. It does not. Chloe does not exist in the comics. And we all thought that she was going to have a big destiny. I thought she was going to become like a member of the Justice League, you know, with grow more abilities from the healing ability. That didn't happen. I thought, okay, maybe she'll marry a member of the Justice League or something, or become the first Oracle in a sense. That kind of happened, but then she got revoked. So now I think her ultimate goal is to become basically the babysitter for the Justice League kids. You know, someone's got to do it. Someone's got to watch the Teen Titans. You know, someone's got to watch them. You know, so and who's better than Chloe? Because Chloe knows all their secrets. She grew up with all the members of the Justice League, most of them anyway. She knows who they are, and the kids don't have to hide who they are when they're around Chloe, because Chloe already knows everything. So I think that's Chloe's destiny. So Chloe's destiny might be a little bit smaller than anyone really thought. Like, they think, oh, she's gonna be this cool intrepid reporter, and like, no, she's the babysitter. She's there to babysit the Teen Titans when they're little kids, before they grow up to become the Teen Titans. So that's kind of what I thought. So I don't think that was her kid. If so, then maybe he just got a bow and arrow set from Uncle Oliver. I refuse to believe that is Oliver and Chloe's son. I just refuse to believe it, because Lois didn't say a line like, oh, Mrs. Queen, you know, or anything. I was listening very carefully, you know, in 7 years. Now, we got to see Jimmy, a little cameo appearance. I was not expecting this at all, because I don't even think I remember seeing it in the credits or anything. So they were very tight-lipped about this cameo. Everyone knew about Lex at this point, and there was no way they were going to keep that a secret. But they were able to keep Jimmy secret. How they did that, I have no idea. And they actually managed to wrangle up the previous actor who played him in season 6 and 7. So 6, 7, and 8, and the fact that how they were able to manage to do that, I have no idea. But that was spot on. That was great, and we got to see a little Perry cameo. He wasn't there physically, but we just heard his voice and we saw the name tag on the door, so that was good enough for me. You know. And then Lois and Clark didn't actually get married until 7 years in the future. But there's still so many unanswered questions. Like, you know, like, okay, back to the whole dark side thing. The finale was really epic. It was really great and everything, but slightly disappointing because there wasn't a lot of action. You know, does anyone else feel that way? Anybody at all? Because even because the previous season finale where Clark fought Zod, that was really good because they both had no powers at the point. He had blue kryptonite there, so it was an even playing field, and it was a brawling match. And I thought it was going to be pretty much at that same level, 10 times bigger, for the finale. No, that didn't happen. Basically, he finally flew. I forgot to mention that he finally flew, and he finally wore the suit. Now, how he flew was Darkseid threw him in midair, and in that millisecond when he was in midair, he spent like 5 minutes in like his mind with Jor-El, and that's when they showed the flashback of all the stuff he did. Now, that I felt was unnecessary. I felt he could have been at the fortress at a different time, remembering all that, and because that was a very long sequence, and I felt like, is this episode just going to be a clip show of all the stuff that he done? Excuse me. Is this just going to be a clip show of all the stuff that he's done? Because if so, then it's like, it's like I felt like that was like time that they could have spent him actually fighting Darkseid. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have the Darkseid Trinity, you know, Godfrey, Granny Goodness, and the other dude. Oliver just shoots 3 arrows at them, and then that's it. All this talking they do, and that was it. I'm slightly disappointed for them using Darkseid, one of the biggest, most epic villains. You can't even put him in the category of villain, but force in the DC universe, and you don't even really use him. I kind of felt like the whole Darkseid storyline was really pushed back to the background the whole season, and then when they brought it to the finale, it kind of looked like they didn't want to do it at all. Well, not that they didn't want to do it at all, but it was like they pushed it back so far that they didn't know what to do with the finale. So they really just focused on Clark becoming Superman, which is fine, but he did not fight anybody. It was just him becoming Superman. It was a lot of exposition, I'm not gonna lie. It was a lot of exposition, very little action, a lot of talking. The whole episode was talking. It was basically him talking to his father, and yes, Jonathan Kent makes an appearance, but people that may say, oh, he's dead, and it wasn't Kryptonian technology or anything that got him to see him. It was just the fact that if he kept him in his heart, he was able to see Jonathan Kent. And that's why he couldn't see him all that time from the premiere to now, was because he put him behind him, and he just was trying to forget him. So he's not a ghost. He's just he's not a ghost, and he's not haunting them. He was just like, he was able to see and feel and hear him if he kept him in his heart, which was nice visual. Now, I gotta talk about the suit for a minute. Now, the suit itself, they said it was from the Superman movie. Now, if anyone looks, first of all, he has a different cape. I'm glad that they gave him a cape that looks more like the classic comic book. Now, if you look, the suit, when it's in the fortress, when it's in the imprisoned ice fortress, the little box that the suit is in, the suit is always covered with the cape, and all you see is the symbol and the top of the suit. You know, they don't even show the bottom half at all in the thing, and when he's wearing it, actually. You know, so he takes the suit out, his father gives it to him, he's holding it, he flies out of the fortress, and as he's holding it, he changes into the suit, and they did it in a way where it doesn't look like he's just taking his journalist clothes off, it just looks like he's just gracefully changing into Superman, and that was a great moment right there. That was a fantastic moment right there. But the thing is, and then of course Lois Lane is in a plane with trying to talk to the president, and the plane's going down. So of course Superman swoops in and saves her, and that was his first save as Superman to Lois. And of course Lois Lane was there front and center with the camera to report it. And I was thinking, yes, now we're really getting there. But the thing is, we see Clark in the suit, but like really far away. Like really far away. And then like it's like CGI, and then we see really close up with like the blue and the face. So it's like we don't see him in the suit exactly. We kind of see him in the suit. So that was a little disappointing, but the very last frame is what I thought the frame should always be. The ending of this series was there's trouble, and then he goes to the roof of Daily Planet. He goes, and they play the theme song, the Superman theme song. I was not expecting that at all. I totally wasn't. And he reveals the Superman shirt, the Superman costume. Anyway, I really like the suit. I really, from what little we saw of it, and I really love the fact that he finally flew. But I can't help but think that the finale, the series finale, this isn't a season finale. We're not going to get 11th season where it's going to be him as Superman finally. This is it. This is the end of the series, you know. And that's how it should end, and a note where it's like him no longer being Clark and him finally becoming Superman, and that's what this whole journey was. That's what this whole show was. Him in the journey becoming Superman, and once he becomes Superman, that's where the show should end. But I kind of feel like they should have ended it on a really big battle. You know, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, if you're gonna have Darkseid in there, you should really have it be the DC Universe incarnation. Like, it was the DC Universe incarnation, but it's just, he just didn't seem as it I don't know. It's just like, I'm not a huge Darkseid fan. You know, like, I do know about Apocalypse and New Genesis and the Elder Gods and Highfather, and they made references to Orion and the whole peace treaty that was made between New Genesis and Apocalypse, which is basically they traded their firstborn sons, and Orion is Darkseid's son that was raised by Highfather, and Highfather's son is Calabac that was raised by Darkseid. You know, and they switched sons, and then that was their treaty. And they dabbled on that a little bit, but I actually thought we were going to see cameo appearances of the gods from New Genesis. I really thought so. I thought we were going to see those characters. I thought we were going to see all that, but the problem was, since there was so much exposition that they had to go through, there was not enough time to do the whole Darkseid story properly. That's the problem. You know, they shouldn't, in my personal opinion, they shouldn't have tackled a villain as big as this. I don't want to really call him a villain, because he's really bigger than a villain. A force as big as Darkseid, unless they had the proper amount of time to really talk up this character. Because They set him up in the season premiere of the season that he was going to be the bad guy. But this whole season, they got sidetracked with the whole registration thing and the government, and which would have been fine if you didn't already have set up the whole thing for Darkseid. It seemed like it was two separate storylines that didn't really coincide together. And then towards the end, they got rid of the whole registration thing altogether. And then, then they just threw in the Darkseid storyline. It's like it was two separate storylines that didn't really go together. Now, when Toyman had his whole Legion of Doom in his last episode, I was thinking that's what this season should have been. It should have been, this whole season should have been forming the Legion of Doom, and that would have been the enemy, and then versus Superman and the Justice League, and then forming the official Justice League. That's what I think it should have ended on. But I'm not a writer. I'm just saying, this is just my thoughts. That's what instead of having it be the government and the Registration Act, I think the side mission, the side storyline should have been the Legion of Doom forming. So we got a little note of that with them getting the files and everything, but I think they should have been causing mischief, and they should have been causing chaos and crime sprees in Metropolis all throughout the season, like Roulette and Dark Archer, and you saw Solomon Grundy and Black Manta, and you saw those characters in the little table there, and Metallo, just causing random chaos seemingly random chaos. And the whole Granny Goodness and those three characters, they really got pushed to the back. I hate to say it, they really got pushed in the background. This whole storyline, this Darkseid storyline, got pushed to the background, and I feel like they really should have pushed it towards the front. They didn't give the Darkseid storyline as much attention as it deserved, and then thusly the ending, it didn't have enough time to really focus on that, with New Genesis and defeating Darkseid and the team forming to defeat Darkseid. They didn't really make it about Darkseid. They were just focusing on the fact that Clark was finally become Superman. So I took it as that he didn't really defeat Darkseid, he stopped him. Because there's a difference between defeating Darkseid and stopping Darkseid. So all Clark did was he stopped him from taking over the Earth this one time. He thwarted this one plan. But he didn't defeat him, he didn't kill him. Darkseid will probably come back, if in Smallville mythology if the show were going on. But I kind of wish that there were like just a few more episodes after this. I would have liked a few random episodes in the season that just took place 7 years in the future. I know there was an episode of Homecoming where he went to the future and he saw Lois and everything for those few moments. But I would have liked, does anyone remember the show Heroes? There was one episode where they were in the future the entire episode, and it had a whole bunch of answers for a bunch of questions. And that's what I would have wanted Smallville to do. Just one episode titled 7 Years Later that shows everything. Him in the suit and all that, the whole kit and caboodle. That's what I would have liked. That should have been the two-parter. That's what I would have done. Now I'm getting it. The first part is them, him defeating Darkseid and that whole thing, and then the second part is called 7 Years Later, and the second part is just him in Metropolis 7 years later being Superman and that whole thing. That way you have him in the suit and you get the whole thing. That's what I would have done. That's what they should have done. They should have had it where you have one whole episode titled 7 Years Later, and it takes place. There's a whole block of time that we don't know what happened. 7 years is a long time. I doubt that Chloe and Oliver still are married at that point. I don't want to believe that they're still married, because that's not in the comics, and I know I sound like a big nerd when I say that, but him and Black Canary are supposed to be together. It's just as much as Clark and Lois are supposed to be together. So I feel like, that couple shouldn't have been ignored. They just threw those two together because they wanted to give Chloe, who's a made-up character in Smallville, a love interest, and to give her like a fairy tale ending, like Lois got her fairy tale ending with being with Clark. But I feel like she's the Justice League babysitter, like I said earlier. She's just destined to be the babysitter for all the kids in the Justice League who become the Teen Titans, and that's pretty much all she'll do. And she'll train them and this, that, whatever. Not train them, but watch over them. But here's a side note I'm going to go to. One side note. If Birds of Prey, stay with me, if Birds of Prey was on the air, if it was still on the air today, this finale would have been 10 times better. Why do I say that? Because Birds of Prey would have had already a couple of crossovers. Now, if anyone thinks back to Season 5, episode Vengeance, the episode right after Jonathan Kent died, there was a character called the Angel of Vengeance, who was wanting to seek revenge, who was a girl who received powers from a kryptonite-infused heart. Now, I was thinking that, I didn't realize it till after, years later, when I re-saw Birds of Prey, that she reminded me a lot of Huntress. Now, I was thinking, if Birds of Prey was still on the air, they would have had a Huntress Smallville crossover. And it would have been Huntress meeting Clark, and it would have been her tracking down the Clayface in Metropolis, and that would have been really awesome. And then in the episode Siren in Season 7, we would have had Black Canary in Metropolis, and then possibly even Oracle, talking to Chloe, who was their Oracle at the time, and then, that would have been great. That would have been fantastic. And we would have had Batman on the show, and that's a whole nother thing. We would have had Bruce Wayne on Smallville, and that would have been a whole nother thing entirely. And then, possibly, in this finale, we would have seen, again, Oracle. We would have seen possibly Bruce Wayne as the best man. No offense to Justin Hartley or the character Green Arrow, but Batman and Superman, Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne, those two characters are more closely knit. Those two know the most about each other than Clark and Green Arrow. Green Arrow didn't come in till later. The only reason why they got Green Arrow is because they couldn't get Bruce Wayne. So I feel like if they would have had Bruce Wayne, this series would have been 10 times better. It would have been even closer to the mythology, but because of the whole thing of them doing the Nolan North Batman movies, they couldn't get him in the series. And since Birds of Prey was long gone, they had no rights to put Batman on the TV show. But I just kept thinking, oh man, if Birds of Prey was on the air, they could have had those crossovers, and it would have been so amazing. They could have had Oracle coming to Metropolis and being Oracle, and so many others. Oh man, I just keep thinking about that, and I keep thinking also like what Birds of Prey would have become if it lasted 10 seasons. They could have also introduced Cassandra Cain, the second Batgirl, and they could have introduced Stephanie Brown as the first female Robin. And they could have been the other two operatives that work with Birds of Prey along with Dinah and Huntress. So that would have been really great. But that's a whole nother tangent. That's a whole nother thing. I'll probably discuss that in a whole nother different video. Anyway, it was good. It was a good finale. But I would have really liked to see more him in the future. Like him in the future wearing a suit, being with Lois. It was a great episode. I just felt it was a little anticlimactic because he didn't really fight Darkseid. He just kind of flew in to punch him, and then he just turned into the bird Smog, Now the whole thing about Supergirl going to the 31st century, that I didn't mind, because there wasn't a whole lot for her to do in that present time, because she can't really fight the Darkseid battle, and she could always come back. There's not saying she's banned to stay in the 31st century. She could come back if she wants to visit him. They could just, because they have the time traveling abilities that, they could just time travel back whenever they want just to visit, Clark, at that time. And then the Legionnaires will recognize him now as Superman, because now he is Superman. So I would have also liked to see Kara with the suit, because we got to see her in a costume, but it's the costume without the symbol and the cape. That's all it's pretty much missing. So I just the one thing I would have liked besides more action was I would have liked a montage that what happened in that 7-year block, because it's great to fast forward 7 years. I hate to sound like a broken record. I just want to know what happened in those 7 years, because those 7 years hold the key to a lot of unanswered questions. You know, who in the world is that kid in the beginning? I refuse to believe that is Green Arrow and Chloe's kid. I refuse to believe that. I want to think that Chloe's babysitting Oliver and Dinah's kid. That's what I want to believe. You know, that's really all I gotta say about that. Other than that, it was a great finale. It was a fun ride. It was a great show. And I will be doing my reviews about Smallville very soon. I'll be starting with season 1 with my retro Smallville reviews, doing a full season and in total, and then going in chronological order all the way to 10. I just wanted to talk about this one episode and how great the show was. It was a great ride, and I didn't want to wait till I got to see this on DVD. I felt like I had to talk about this now. So, because it was such a great episode, but I felt like it could have been a lot better, you know. But I think I talked enough. You know, write a comment below. Tell me what you thought about this episode. Did you think it was great, good, or otherwise? And would you have liked to see more of the suit? Would you like to see him make a cameo appearance in the upcoming Superman movie? If so, write a comment below. And stay tuned for more reviews, rants, random funniness, and just random blogs that I have to say.